Jason Residlo reporting from the 2016 Concours d'Elegance of America seminar series. Right now, they're talking about the design and development of the Ford GT. Let's take a listen.
Freddie, what was the most significant moment, most memorable moment in the development of the Ford GT? And what did you see the biggest challenge? And then each of you just give us your recollections as we go down the road. You'll have to pass mics as we get to the end. Go ahead, Freddie.
Well, the best memory for me was the introduction out of Laguna Seca. I mean, I didn't think we'd get to that point, but when we had the press introduction out there with all the press and the worldwide introduction out there with race car drivers and press, and the team was out there, I mean, it was great. I mean, that was really the official kickoff of the program, and that was a huge memory for me personally. And the second question, the biggest challenge was, I mean, I knew that the team, because we had the best in the company, inside and outside the company, working on the program, so that I knew that each one of the systems and each one of the parts in the car was going to be there, because we had the best engineers available working on it, so I knew the parts were going to get there. But the biggest challenge was getting all the parts in that car. I mean, the car was a little bit bigger, quite a bit bigger than the original car, but there was more parts in that car than that original race car. So it was the biggest challenge was 10 pounds in a 5-pound box, and especially inside the cabin. I mean, if you saw what was under that dash, you said there was no way that we were going to get all that stuff with all the safety things that had to go in that car and that. So that to me was the biggest challenge. I knew the parts were going to be there and they would meet all the engineering criteria because we had the guys to do it. But getting everything in that car, that was the challenge. So.
Thanks, Freddie. And by the way, Dan Gurney was one of the guys out at Laguna Seca driving the cars. Of course, we had Jay Leno entertaining the press at the time as well. It was a good memory. Kurt?
Yeah, it was. The crankshaft brings back memories that Chris mentioned, and we were trying to get through our key durability test on the engine, which is 300 hours of running 45% of that 300 peak torque, 45% of peak power, and then 10% overspeed. It's a grueling test. 300 hours, when you start going through your actual efficiency on the dynamometer, takes 4 to 5 weeks, so you're on pins and needles for quite a period of time. The crankshaft failure actually occurred at about 125 hours in. And I happened to be out of the dynamometer building that day with my counterpart at Roush, Greg White. We were in a conference room going through some things, and a guy poked his head in the room who I didn't know at the time, later found out was JC, who we became pretty good friends with, but he pokes his head in somewhat of a smart aleck way. He said, "Is that your engine in South D out there, the one that just blew up?" And I looked at Greg and I said, "Are we at cell D?" He said, "Yes," but I didn't know the cell numbers at that time. We go out there, and here's the fire department. The Bodie Fire Department is in. The water sprinklers are going off everywhere. They've got their jackets on. We see a damper in the front end of the crankshaft sitting over in the corner of a dyno cell, kind of sneak underneath their yellow jackets, grab it apart, and head it out. So a week later, we had a new crankshaft in place in the next engine, and we went at it again, which led to the most memorable moment. It was June 12, 2003. It was the first day of the centennial. And we passed that test at the 300-hour mark at about 5 a.m. And I got the phone call, and it was like having my first kid. It was just great. So, challenge-wise, that was a big challenge for that test, but probably at a component level, the cylinder block was an all-new aluminum block that didn't share a whole lot other than bore and stroke with the architecture that it came from. And we had a great team on it. We had some support from the Ford mainstream casting people to help us through it. The toughest thing is getting that done inside of about 18 months because with casting there's porosity issues and other things you have to deal with. And it was pretty grueling, but we got it there. Those of you who have that car, that block is literally indestructible, and we're pretty proud of it. So that was one of the challenges among many. Thanks.
Thanks, Kurt. Great job. Bill?
Okay, probably the greatest challenge in the body area was getting those side windows to open on the doors. The concept car, I had the GT40, the windows are leaned in quite a bit, and the door itself has a big deep pocketed area for air to reach the scoop behind the door. So we talked about flip windows and a little slider that you could reach out to get your tickets and your tacos, but nobody wanted to do that stuff. So we had to figure out a way to make this window open like a real car would. And we had a couple of really good CAD designers who just kept pushing that surface, a little more radius in the glass, pushing it a little more, working with Camillo in the studio to try to push that surface of the door a little bit this way, a little that way, enough to make him uncomfortable and nervous. But eventually we got to a point where the animation in CAD showed, okay, it drops, it works. And, I remember the meeting in the studio that day, and everybody kind of blessed it and said, okay, we're good, let's go. Some smiles, and I was pretty much terrified. Because I looked at it and saw these real thin moldings. It doesn't have to be a die casting, and we didn't know how we were going to attach it yet. We didn't know who was going to make it, how we were going to make it reliable and keep out wind noise and water leaks and all that stuff that people expect from a car. And so it was still a long road after that. It was, trying to get everything to dial in and be able to build it. And we were only building 9 cars a day, but still had to be able to put it together pretty quickly. And so it was a great challenge, but we eventually got there.
Most memorable?
Most memorable? 2 things. I think it was fun for all of us to get to meet a lot of the legends from the GT40s from the 60s. And they came around to lend inspiration. And for me personally, it was very early in the program before I really met any of them. And I had a voicemail on my phone, and it was, "Hello, Bill, this is Carol Shelby calling. Just wanted to call you and talk, and I think I have some ideas for you." So, as a kid who grew up reading about him, I was floored that day. So I called him back, and he had some ideas, and I don't remember what I said to him. It was probably silly, but and then later on, Fred mentioned when we got to introduce the cars out in California to the media. We're at Laguna Seca one day, and Dan Gurney was there, and he was giving hot laps, and it was meant for key dealers and media, but I snuck a ride in there and got to ride with Dan Gurney at Laguna Seca. Even at 72, I was really thrilled with the ride he gave. It was very fast. So that was probably one of my most special moments.
Thanks, Bill. Mark?
Most memorable moment. I was lucky enough to be sent to Italy, a place called Nardo. It's a 7.8 miles perfect circle on the Aegean Sea. And for 10 days, we basically ran 2 GTs at VMAX. So you basically circulated this track, flat foot in 5th gear. The car won't pull, top speed in 6. And that basically was a day in the office where you would go 207 to 209 miles an hour all day long. You could go 5 laps. You would do 18 gallons of gasoline in about 16 minutes. You wouldn't make the 6th lap because you would run out of gas. It was one of the few times you could actually see the gas gauge go down while you're driving. And one caveat, the cars were restricted to 205 miles an hour. And the first time we ever got to 205 was at Nardo in total blackness. It was about midnight. I can guarantee you I was overdriving the headlights. Most
Biggest challenge?
challenge, probably the tires. Goodyear was our supplier, but they were very reluctant to make change. And if you know how the tire submission business works, they basically supply you 3 prototype tire construction and compound at a time. And you get to about and they're alphabetized, and you get about halfway through the alphabet when you finally freeze the tire. Well, in the GT program, we went through the alphabet twice. But to their credit, when we finished, we did have a tire that was capable of sustaining speed of 200 miles an hour, good in the wet. We even tested it in the snow. I personally have driven my car in the snow. It actually is pretty decent, but not recommended.
All right. Next up, Jamal.
Biggest challenge, I would say, was more of a human challenge more so than a technical challenge, and that was you know, like you said, Chris, we were a little team of about 30 people. Many of us had very vibrant personalities. And just keeping the team together, working together, marching towards the end goal, despite crazy deadlines, you know, things are happening every day. Things pop up, you fix one thing and another thing pops up. And so really just, that was the biggest challenge for me. And knowing when, you know, our team was kind of outside of the main Ford system, but we were somewhat in as well, and knowing when to utilize the vast resources of Ford Motor Company and all the technology and knowledge that it holds, and then knowing when to go off on your own and do our own thing. That was challenging. I mean, we had never done that before, and so we were kind of writing the book on how to do that. So that was interesting. Memorable for me was one moment at the Centennial when it was right outside of Henry Ford Museum, and it was the blue car, I think, one of the Centennial blue cars that Dan Gurney came in and sat in the car for the first time, and just like the look on his face. And I think someone captured an amazing photo of him sitting in that car. And just like I mean, you could just see how proud he was of the original car and this, you know, the 2005 car. And I mean, he just had like this unbelievable smile on his face. He didn't have to say a word. You just saw it on his face. I thought that's a memory that, you know, I'll remember always.
Thanks, Jamal.
Well, I came on later in the program than the rest of the team, so all these guys had everything figured out by the time I was on the program. But I think the challenge was similar to what Jamal said. You know, Ford is used to developing vehicles and proving them out on vehicles that can be built at 50 jobs an hour, right? Every hour, 50 units come off the end of the line. And there's a whole bunch of processes and tests and standards you have to meet to be able to repeatedly have the vehicle go together at one every minute. And so building one at 50 a week or 45 a week required a really different mindset. So a lot of the biggest challenge was exactly what you said, figuring out what parts of the process applied and which of them didn't. And particularly for people who had a different opinion, to be honest, a lot of my job was providing air cover for the team so they didn't have to do some of that stuff. So that was, I think, the biggest challenge, and particularly figuring out what we were going to be doing between Saline and Wixom. And Wixom was obviously the mainstream Ford plant, so a lot of that stuff, figuring out what was the right balance, and managing, as Jamal said, a lot of personalities. I think the most memorable moment, other than Job 1, which was always a memorable moment, when that first production saleable vehicle comes off the end of the line, I think the sign-off drive. I still think that was like the best sign-off drive in history when we drove from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, and there's so many moments there, hoping Jamal wasn't going to puke in the passenger seat. And I remember when we were up in, I think was it Dante's Peak?
Dante's Peak, yeah.
Top of it. No, I'm not going to talk about that.
No, we're going to show it.
Are we going to show it? Yeah. We were up at the top of the canyon. We had 4 cars, and we were just parked up there for a break, and we were going to take a picture up there. And I still have the picture. It was actually in my garage. But while we were up there, this F-18 comes flying by above us. And then he came back again. So he clearly saw us up there and wanted to see what we were. And then we thought he was gone. And then the next thing we know, this guy comes down, he's in the canyon, we're looking down at him, and full afterburner, and he just wanted to show us what real horsepower was. And so that was a great moment, and still, I'll never forget that drive, and it's certainly one of the highlights of my career.
Maybe you can answer 2 questions. What did you learn, if anything, from the Ford GT that you carried over into the new Ford GT development? And what's different what had to be new and different in the process of developing the new car versus the old car?
You know, the one thing that I carry over from the last GT to the new GT is, you know, you can't be risk averse when choosing architectures, choosing technology, things like that. There's so much new technology in the new car, and you know, you just have to manage all of that risk. And if you think about all of the things that could go wrong on any given day, it would, you know, you go jump off a cliff or something. So it's managing all that risk and keeping engineers from panicking on a daily basis. And it was, you know, that to me is the biggest common thing from the old program to the new program.
Raj?
Yeah, I think the biggest common thing is, you know, we saw with you guys in the 05 team what a small team can do, but still leverage big Ford for the right things. And so, you know, watching how the 05-06 team did that really well. We got to leave. It's certainly something that we reproduced for this car, and having the right balance of the right small empowered team, you know, the best guys, the cream of the crop, but also being able to leverage big Ford when we need to for, you know, all the skills and resources that Ford Motor Company can bring to bear when it wants to do something. I think the biggest difference in developing the two was this one was really, it had a goal in mind, which was to win in 2016 at Le Mans. And so what we needed as the basis for the GT race car was always at the heart of what we were doing for designing the production car. We knew we had to do a great production car. We knew we had a lot to live up to from the 05-06. We had a lot to live up to in the racing pedigree of the GT40. And so balancing both of those was the biggest difference, because we always knew from the very beginning we were going to race it. And so many of the decisions were based on, we need to do